Okay, so there are all the numbers out of the way. This is Planet X, and let's say a very good evening and welcome back to Tony Topping. Welcome to Planet X.
Good evening, Neil. How are you? I see Steve sat there like an ageing rock star with his headphones on. He had one earpiece to his ear. It looked really groovy, actually. I was impressed. Yes, no, remote viewing, isn't it? Fantastic. And you've got to ask yourselves, why did the Bilderbergers book a Marriott hotel in the middle of Texas for all to see?
Well, we were talking about this last week.
Just bizarre, in plain view. Where's the real Bilderberg meeting? That's the question, Neil, that I asked. But anyway,
if you don't know, by the way, because we've got new listeners listening in all the time.
Hello.
So if you don't know what the Bilderbergers are all about, basically it's all the top leaders,
correct,
all the big wealthy banking families. They all meet in secret every year,
correct.
And apparently you've got to be a Bilderberger to progress in life. You've got to be a Bilderberger to be a president or a prime minister.
That's correct. Yeah,
and they all meet in secret, and nobody ever talks about it. It never gets on the mainstream.
But I think I'm sure you would agree, Steve, that the media are becoming more plain secret in open view. So what they're saying is, of course the meeting happens, nothing to worry about. You know what I'm saying? It's just crazy, isn't it? But there you go. But,
okay, well, that's Bilderbergers. Let's just mention what Steve was talking before about the Olympics, this whole false flag thing. Is there going to be an alien invasion?
No, I don't think there'll be an alien invasion. I think there might be a security incident in view of the... I mean, I did a thing for the BBC only last week to do with 7/7, like a documentary project, and I just felt it was like being assimilated by the Borg, but that's to try and change my opinion. Very interesting documentary, but anyway, as per that, no, I don't think there'll be any form of alien invasion. You've got to look to countries like India and Peru and the South American countries like Chile and look at what they're doing with the UFO situation before you can, and then you can make an informed choice as to whether you think the Olympics are going to have alien invasion going on. You might get the odd UFO turning up, I'm sure, but I don't think it will be any invasion. No,
there was talk last week on the show about something called, is it Blue Beam?
Yeah, Project Blue Beam. Absolutely. Yeah.
What's that about?
Well, I think that Project Blue Beam is the actual projection of a fake UFOs within the sky kind of thing. So it gives the impression it's a bit like the Fatima incident. I think, would I be right, Steve? Where there actually there's three of them actually. Was it the Fatima incident? It was like an energy projection.
That's right.
That's correct. So therefore, what you've got here is like the projection of a false alien invasion designed to cause panic, etc., etc. But I think that we've come a long way since 1947 regarding UFOs, and governments actually know quite a lot about them. Except I had a savage attack on my Facebook page the other day by a very well-known man who works in the United Nations. I won't mention his name, and he absolutely went for me because I proposed the opinion that an alien invasion was hoax and that aliens do exist and that governments are aware of them. And he was saying, well, I worked in the US military in '89 and we made it all up and you've fallen for it, you imposter, you know. And I'm lucky to be alive because of my experiences. Very seriously, I am. So I can't give this guy's name, but I was very shocked by what he said because he was deeply involved in the UFO subject very publicly as well. He now works for the UN, and I was shocked by his outburst, so much so that I chucked him off my Facebook page because of the alien invasion issue.
So why do you think if he was involved in it in the first place?
Because
turned a little bit.
What your listeners may not know, Neil, is if you look at some of the conspiracy theory websites, some intelligence services like Iran and Russia, to name but a few, will actually on purpose crank up conspiracy theories towards Western governments. And the KGB had a unit called Service 5 that did that in the 50s, and that was all anti-Israeli stuff. Now the thing with this is that what this guy was saying was that he was part of a disinformation campaign in the early 1989 and early 80s to do with Roswell and to do with the development of the transistor and all that kind of thing. And he accuses me of misleading the public when in fact he's misled the public. But what was more shocking is his position in the UN and his "don't talk to me, young man" routine when you don't know who I am. So, it was just bizarre. It's just the disinformation projects do exist, and I wasn't disagreeing with him about that. They do exist. To put the CIA with Area 51, they did all kinds of things to give China and Russia false information. So that does happen in espionage quite routinely, but that does not dispute the fact that UFOs and governments are aware of them. It just doesn't dispute it at all.
But what we always say on the show is, you've got to keep an open mind. There is a lot of good stuff out there, good research out there, but there's also a lot of nonsense out there. So don't just Google it, or don't say, well, I've seen it, and it's because it's been on YouTube, so it must be real.
Correct. And I mean, the project I did last week, we went filming with the BBC. That was about conspiracy and what isn't a conspiracy in is, and we were sobered up pretty quickly by some of the senior bods we spoke to in the police who were involved in the 7/7 incident, and we could clearly see how a conspiracy could be generated from a media centre giving out information, how it could all get absolutely twisted to appear on the internet as something that it isn't, which was very interesting, very interesting.
What's your thoughts on it?
I think conspiracies will always be real, in some people's eyes, of course it's where you actually draw a line. Because we can all end up a little bit paranoid at the end of the day. Of course, yeah, but, certain disinformation programmes, yeah, they do exist. I agree with Tony on that one. There were also countless people who've had experiences. The government... we don't need any more evidence, to say the truth. We don't need another stone to add to the mountain we've already got, to tell you the truth, Neil. In regarding that, there's the evidence to support that the UFO phenomena is a real thing. Of course, UFOs will always exist because they're simply unidentified flying objects, but what we actually are talking here is something which may be exotic or extraterrestrial in origin. That is the question we're asking.
Okay, it is Planet X that you're listening to. We're on until 10 o'clock tonight. And tonight, we are talking... remote viewing. That is our special for this evening. Now, Steve, you actually, Phenomena magazine did a special on remote viewing. Was it last month?
Yeah. It was. Yeah, it was last month. And it's really interesting when you start to look into the Project Grill Flame and was it Scan8, I think it was the other one. Yeah,
that's right.
And the amount of money that the government ploughed into these projects, and you got to think, why do it? Why do it for such a length of time as well? Because it wasn't just a flash in the pan. On an official note, they claim that the incidents and the investigation and research and analysis of those projects ended, but they carried on under different names and different projects and secretly. It's not something new, remote viewing. It's been going on in ancient times. It's going on in all over the world. Shamans have said to do it. Buddhist priests. It's a phenomenon that has been looked into quite consistently over the years. And it does seem to be plenty of evidence to support the fact that it is possible to do so.
OK, now, Tony, you've worked with remote viewing and psychic spies, and you've managed to build up a friendship with quite a few well-known remote viewers. Exactly. Tell us a little bit about what we're going to be talking about tonight, and also we're going to attempt to do some live in the studio, apparently.
Yes, so we can certainly do that. I've got a target queue for you, and we'll explain all that, so if you want to go...
You'll have to, because it's all going over my head at the moment. A target what?
A target queue. We've got a target queue for you, and we've got a TRN, so you'll be operationally active by the time we've finished with you, my lad.
Okay.
So, but really, the history of it is frankly quite amazing, especially in terms of Britain, because it was really, I suppose, well, India's been doing it, absolutely, China, Tibet, as you say, Steve, but Britain has a particular interest in terms of intelligence, which espionage is something I'm fascinated with, and really, I think that British intelligence, the first version of our foreign intelligence service, which is MI6, which is MI6 back then, was under a guy called Sir Francis Walsingham, who actually formed Britain's first foreign espionage network all across Turkey and all across the world. And he was actually up against a kind of like the equivalent of SMERSH, like you see in the James Bond movies, but even back then in the time of Elizabeth I, which came in the form of the Catholic Church, and they had an intelligence service known as the Entity, which is still, there's a Proto-Latin name for it, but anyway, it's still going this day. Death and Mayhem is the game with them. And so what happened was he used psychics, did Walsingham, even back then, in the form of John Dee, who was actually the first 007. And what would happen is that John Dee was he was an intuitive dreamer, and what would happen is that Elizabeth I would actually sign her seals and messages to him with the seal 007. So the term 007 actually refers to John Dee, the first master spy or psychic spy. Now, he was responsible for realising that the Forest of Dean that was building the naval fleet against the Spanish was being infiltrated by the French, and he dreamed all this. And really, you could say that it was because of that some of these spies got arrested because of John Dee and his work. Francis Drake as well deployed psychic kind of deployments on the Spanish fleet, turned them back in terms of fire. He had the vision to create fire and turn them back. So in terms of Britain, World War II, Dion Fortune, for example, and if listeners do look on the Facebook page, there's actually a little article they can look at all about the psychic battle of Britain with Dion Fortune, and she was just absolutely incredible because she developed the concept of using kind of metaphors and symbols in the subconscious to direct at Nazi Germany and the Third Reich, and what she did was she then developed that a bit further so that the people were visualising, or the psychics that she'd got together were actually at war with Germany, and there was a big psychic war going on. You might be aware of it, Stephen. There was a big psychic war going on, and what she did is she made these massive visualisations all across Britain's coastline and all this kind of thing. She was very involved in World War II in terms of psychic battles and all that kind of thing. They were Ashdown Forest was a key base in psychically attacking the Germans. And it was called The Psychic Battle of Britain. A very interesting book written about that. So we can see this constant theme in Britain anyway of psychics, and then we move our attention to America and what was going on there. And everybody thinks, as Steve pointed out earlier, there's Project Scanate, Stargate, Grill Frame, for example. These are all actual project numbers that were designated. But what a lot of people don't know is that America was doing that even before Scanate, and even before that. They had something called MK Often in 1950, the MK Often program. And Project MK Often was led under Sidney Goltsieb, and that was to do with the exploration of the inner reaches of the mind. And it was called MK Often because often they reached their goal and often they did not. So MK Often, and he was using psychics, black magic, all that kind of thing. They came up with this bizarre concept at the CIA that perhaps we could use psychic spies and all that kind of thing to contact dead agents for information that they may have gone to the grave with. Honest to God,
I recall that.
Yeah, absolutely. And also this kind of. But what was surprising about this is during the course of the 1950s, I keep referring back to something called the Collins Elite, and during what your listeners don't know, if you just Google or go to my website tonytopping.com, it'll explain that the elite agency called the Collins Elite. But what was happening was they discovered during the course of MK Often that there was possibly something demonic going on behind the scenes in terms of psychic realms and all that kind of thing, and that was to do with something called the non-human entity, or NHE. NHE it's pronounced. And there was a lot of rumours going around about them wiring up military psychics to machines and having people being killed by these mysterious entities that were coming into the dream realm and all this kind of thing. It made Inception look tame. And that was in the 1950s, before Project Scanate and Stargate,
So back then, did they really know what they were doing?
No, they didn't. They didn't have a clue. I mean, there was a strange.
Was it a lot of trial and error?
A lot of trial and error back then, and there was a strange rumour of actual photo shown to a Catholic priest in New York. They approached him because they said that they'd come across the DIA, defence people, during the 1950s, had come across these strange demonic interactions that were going on in terms of the human subconscious and all this kind of thing, and they were pretty scared about it, and said that in private that they had no control over this. And so before Project Scanate and all that kind of thing, it was MK Often that really was if you look it up on Google, it will be there, and it was headed by Sidney Goltsieb, who also drugged people as well. I mean, he was a CIA mind experiment guy. He was absolutely crazy, and the whole thing was just insane what they did. I mean, they were dealing with black arts, fortune tellers. They tried anything to gather intelligence via psychic means, hence the remote viewing programs of Scanate, Stargate. What they developed, or rather what Russell Targ and Ingo Swann developed, was a subconscious system of seeing, of gathering intelligence beyond normal means using the mind, not psychic, subconscious. It's pretty groovy what they developed. It was called coordinate remote viewing, or CRV, or scan by coordinate. And as we will see later, I'm going to give you a coordinate, and I'm going to show you very quickly a very basic, very quick crash course in that, and you'll be fascinated about how they designed it so that any soldier or any member of personnel on a battlefield could deploy this protocol and see subconsciously what was going on. In 1975, the Defence Intelligence Agency were raving about it, trying to get intelligence operatives to be psychic. They spent big bucks on it because the Russians were streets ahead. And Steve, you probably will know of the kinetic kind of things, know, the scary big Russian KGB people.
Right. I mean, they tried amplification through specialised equipment, didn't they? I mean, it's some crazy experiments they were doing.
They did. And I mean, what is also fascinating, if your listeners Google up, for example, there was Project Stargate, but if your listeners have a look on Google and look at a remote action investigation with marine animals, that's a very interesting article, because it's all about using dolphins and whales in terms of MK often in terms of Stargate, and according to the results, they had sonar-like perception, did dolphins. I question the ethics of that, but there is a report, if you Google it, about that in terms of the Stargate project. Definitely so.
Well, we're going to take a break, but just before we do that, we're going to be talking to some of the retired remote viewers. Tell us a bit about them. Paul Smith is lined up. He was one of the guys who worked with Ingo Swann.
He was
kind of thought of as the granddaddy of remote viewing.
Ingo Swann is kind of like the founder. I mean, what's fascinating about Ingo Swann is he counted the rings on which is the planet with the rings on? Is it Saturn? Yeah. Well, he counted all the rings.
The Cassini division.
That's right. He counted them very accurately before they'd even sent satellites up using remote viewing. So he was the grandfather of the project Scanate. And then there's obviously David Morehouse, Pat Price, and on your Facebook page, your listeners will actually see a drawing to do with Pat Price, and that's actually a remote view drawing of a gantry crane at a top secret Soviet submarine base using coordinate remote viewing. It's just a fascinating picture to look at of the results of that. And so Paul Smith was obviously a master sergeant, and when it comes to linguistics and languages, he's the man, and he was definitely on the ball with the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Although later on, I'm going to come out with some even more revealing stuff about that, about what the Indian intelligence service has to say about that.
Okay.
Because they use remote viewers as well, and they're pretty hot. So we'll be looking at that.
We'll look at that as well. Yeah. We've also got, is it Lynn Buchanan?
Yeah, Lynn Buchanan.
Gerald
Gerald's
O'Donnell.
Amazing. Yeah, Lynn's amazing. Gerald's just incredible. I mean, Lynn has got a brilliant history. If you look him up on the internet, you'll see all about what he's done. He was the one who tried to make Saddam Hussein ill, and to depose him, and ended up being ill himself. He's the one who brought down all the computers at NATO, so it is said, and he was then spotted by Major General Albert Stubblebine, who was in the John Ronson film The Men Who Stare at Goats. The question what baffles me about Lynn, and probably baffled Lynn as well, is how the hell did they know it was him who'd done what he'd done? But they somehow did. And so he's had a real career in remote viewing, and he kind of like now hunts for lost children using remote viewing techniques. And Gerald O'Donnell is in his own league really in the early 80s. I mean, he was trying to he was involved with Western intelligence agencies developing intuition for secret agents and all that kind of thing in operational situations. He was involved in all that kind of thing, and he has a fascinating take on the kind of the higher dimensional connection. What the key component is with all these men is the fact that they, including the KGB guys as well, is their lives were never the same once they started doing this. They were in the military, they were hardened men, and suddenly their minds changed to become more environmentally conscious, connecting with higher dimensions and all that kind of thing, which they never would have done so. And probably Paul Smith will probably tell you something about that, as well as Lynn Buchanan. So amazing guest, Neil.
So we've got those guys to speak to later on in the show. We're also going to be attempting some remote viewing in the studio. I have no idea how that's going to go. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing most of the time, but we'll see how we get on with that. Tony's going to apparently teach us some. We've also got news of a workshop that we're going to do at the Novotel, which is in Liverpool City Centre. Tony's going to be running a special remote viewing and psychic spying workshop. So if you fancy that, that's in a few weeks' time on the 22nd of June, which is a Friday at the Novotel. And we'll get full details on the website and also on the Facebook page. If you've got any questions, if you'd like to know more about remote viewing...
Well, fire away,
then, get in touch. The guys are here ready for you.
Absolutely.
Text to talk and then your question to 61025, or just give us a call, 0151 708 1059. Back with more on remote viewing on Planet X next.
From aliens to angels, conspiracies to cover-ups, this is Planet X on City Talk 105.9.
Welcome back to Planet X. We're on till 10 o'clock tonight, and it's a remote viewing and psychic spy special. Tony Topping is in with us, and we're going to be talking to some of our special guests, Lynn Buchanan and also Gerald O'Donnell, who are retired, would you say? Retired ex-remote viewers.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're going to chat to them in just a little while, get them on the phone live from the States. But we've also got some clips to play out. Where do you want to go first with these?
Well, I think maybe if we start with the guy who we've not mentioned so far, which is Major Ed Dames. And he's just giving a kind of like a brief spiel here of how remote viewing works, which is very interesting. So I think it would be worth putting him on. We've also got him talking about Iran as well. and maybe that would be an interesting clip to also for your listeners to have a listen to, Neil. But the one with Ed explaining basically how remote viewing works and his experiences of remote viewing is just an interesting little clip.
Okay, let's have a listen. And this is Ed Dames, who's
Ed Dames.
Again worked in the American
he was like
Army.
He was like in the psychic unit of Grill Frame Stargate. He was like one of the guys who was a teacher, as it were. I've forgotten the precise name. It's a monitor. It's called a monitor in terms of remote viewing. So there's the remote viewer and there's the monitor.
Okay, let's take a listen.
His role was.
My job was to attempt to penetrate using any means possible former Soviet missile programs, biological warfare programs, very sensitive top-secret weapons programs. And in cases where I was not able to do this or to engineer penetration, I turned to tactics of desperation. And one of those tactics was to use psychics. It turned out that the U.S. military, in conjunction with former Stanford Research Institute, was developing its program. The CIA was paying for some of that. Army was paying for some of that as well. The ability to remote view, what we call remote viewing, essentially systematic ESP, is an innate ability. We all have that. Most of us have had experiences where we know the phone's going to ring, or we hear a voice in our head, those kinds of things. So what I do as a training officer is to take that innate ability and turn it into a skill. When I say that, for instance, remote viewing as one particular aspect of consciousness is a teachable skill, that does not imply that there aren't those who are born with very, very gifted in terms of psychic antenna. There are. When I teach those people remote viewing, the very gifted natural psychic can produce about twice as much detailed information about a target, a person, a place, a thing, or an event. The natural psychic can become an all-star as opposed to merely a pro in terms of this skill. Obviously, our sister science, telekinesis, psychokinesis, remote influencing. There are people who are born with the ability to project ideas and thoughts to a greater degree than, say, you or I. Remote viewing is not real time. It requires 3 steps. Knowing what to look for, how to search what we call the matrix, the unconscious, the global mind, the universal mind, what search terms to put in there, the skill itself, downloading the information, and then analysis. To have thrown away that capability and just throw money at other technologies that can't answer the mail, that is sinful in my mind.
Okay, that's a remote viewer called Ed Dames. Again, just briefly, explain a little bit about Ed.
Ed Dames was what would be described as a monitor, and he would actually direct the remote viewer to the target. A very controversial figure, and he ended up developing something called Problem Solutions Innovations, or PSI, after the Stargate program, and he's come out with some very controversial remarks regarding remote viewing of the sun, called a kill shot, whereby he would indicate that there's some kind of corona mass ejection called a kill shot that would affect everything on Earth. So he's done that thing. But if you read one of his books about all the remote viewing he's done, his team are very talented at investigating missing children. And on a number of occasions that I've seen some remarkable remote viewing drawings of where children have been missing, and they've actually, due to his remote viewing techniques and his team, they've actually showed up, where they are. There's a remarkable clip of him on YouTube. If you put in, now I couldn't locate it, Neil, for some reason, but if you put in on YouTube Ed Dames Madrid train bombing, you will actually see Ed Dames taking his team through what they suspect is an impending terrorist incident. They're not sure what it is or where it is, but when they put all the data together, it points to the Madrid train bombing. It's a fascinating clip, and that's Ed Dames. Amazing
Fantastic. Thanks for that. This is Planet X. Oh, by the way, a little round of applause for Dan. He's made it into the studio.
Thanks, everyone.
You've joined us in the studio. I was just saying before, since we mentioned the Bilderbergers last week, my computer's not working. You were delayed getting in. Is there some weird conspiracy going on, do you think?
I don't think so this time.
just a train delay. That's all it is. Dan is in, so that means that the Facebook is now up and running. So if you'd like to get interactive on the Facebook, give us the details, Dan.
Yes, if you want to join the group, Planet X Radio City 105.9, you can just ask to join the group and I'll accept you live here on the air, and then you can just post on the page, fire in your questions. We've already got some questions lined up for Tony, questions on remote viewing and some other subjects as well, so we'll see if we can get into that later on the show.
Okay, Facebook and then City Talk 105.9 is the Facebook page, and as Dan says, he's ready and waiting to accept you. If you'd like to just text in, text your questions by texting the word talk, then a question, then your name to 61025, or just give us a call 01517 708 1059. Now, we're going to attempt to have a go at this remote viewing before the 9 o'clock news, because it's not complicated, but there will be, if we're trying to do it on air, there'll probably be lots of dead air, okay, which is not good for a talk radio programme. So I think we should set it up, and I've got the little sheet in front of me, so we'll set it up and we'll have a little go just before...
what could possibly go wrong, Neil? That's what I'm saying.
Absolutely. Especially now we've infuriated the Bilderberger Group and the powers that be. So we'll have a little go at that just before 9 o'clock. So we've got these little sheets, but I'll explain more about those in just a little while. Tony Topping is here along with Steve Mera and Dan the Man, and we're doing a remote viewing special. Now, let's talk a little bit about how it actually works. We've got a clip here, so we'll play this, and then we'll come back and discuss some more with Tony about how remote viewing and psychic spying works.
The development of a working protocol led to a greater question. What makes remote viewing actually work? This aspect of RV research may still be one of the most mysterious and controversial topics in related scientific research. But thanks to quantum physics, a theory called quantum entanglement may provide new insight. At one time, physicists believed that atoms were the smallest form of matter in existence. Then we discovered that atoms were actually comprised of even smaller particles called electrons, protons, and neutrons. Today we now know that even deeper levels of subatomic particles exist in the composition of all matter, including biological life, forms of energy and neurons, a component for human thought. As the name implies, entanglement occurs when two or more of these subatomic particles form an association at what is now believed to be the lowest level of subatomic existence. The association between these particles allows influence that affects one particle to occur to the other instantly and regardless of distance. As a result, some researchers refer to this as non-locality, nullifying the idea that information travels between the particles, and instead that it is somehow already and instantaneously connected at another level of existence. The advancements made within quantum mechanics, including the theory of quantum entanglement, may begin to provide the answers to how the unconscious mind is able to obtain information about an unknown or remote target in the past, present, or future, providing insight into the mechanics behind remote viewing and all related ESP skill.
Okay, so there's a little clip on the mechanics behind remote viewing. Interesting there that they seem to think that that particular expert seems to think that you can do past, present, or future.
Yes, you can. You certainly can do a past, present, and future because time is not fixed in terms of it's got a non-locality to it. So time is happening all the time, and there's a possibility, therefore, that the future is the present, and the past is the present, and so on and so forth. So there's some very interesting material out there regarding that, especially to do with kind of like signal lines and time and the influence of events on a signal line, which was a kind of like a basic working protocol that was kind of like I was working on and looking at in terms of my own research, and that came up with some very interesting results indeed, certainly so.
Okay, we've got more clips to play. I want to get on Jim Mars's take on remote viewing. And for listeners who don't know, tell us a bit about Jim Mars.
Jim Mars wrote the book Sci-Spies, and he was actually censored by the US government. And when he discovered about what was going on, he was censored by the US government. The book wasn't called Sci-Spies originally, but the reason why he was censored by the US government was to do with the fact that it was involving UFOs and remote viewing and UFOs, and that's why. And the major concern about this was that what happened in the remote viewing unit in the US Lynn might tell you, was that I think it was Major Dames started tasking them with strange targets that had probably can have a very deep psychotic effect on the mind. You've got to be very careful. Although the technique they developed used the subconscious mind, in some cases they were looking at UFO targets here, there and everywhere. In fact, later on, Neil, we'll be looking at just such a thing that's doing the rounds at the moment, very current. Basically, they tasked them to look at UFOs, and that's what Jim Marrs discovered, and he was censored by the US government. His publisher couldn't go through with it, but then for some reason his book Sci Spies was then published.
Let's take a listen to what Jim Marrs has to say about his little take on remote viewing.
The CIA decided maybe they better divest themselves of any questionable program, so they passed along their psychic research to the U.S. Army, and eventually they created an operational unit of about 24 people, headquartered here. What you see here is the former bakery school at Fort Meade, Maryland, and they turned it into their remote viewing center headquarters. And according to the guys that were there, Scan-8, because that was scanning by coordinate, and they still refer to it as coordinate remote viewing. It took me a long time, and I like to think of myself as smart, but it took me a long time. To begin with, they were actually using longitude, latitude coordinates, and then giving the coordinates to potential remote viewers, and then seeing how accurate they may be. In other words, if they gave them a coordinate for the North Pole, and the viewer began to describe white and ice and snow, and oh, I see a bear and he's all white, well, then they know that he was on target. But after a while, they realized that you didn't need to have a longitude, latitude, absolute coordinate, that any number representing the target. And the best I can explain this to you, and this is very simplistic, and I can't even guarantee you this is the way it works, but what I figured out was, if I think of a target, let's say the Eiffel Tower, well, of course, I can't tell you as a remote viewer, go remote view the Eiffel Tower, because immediately you've either been there, you've seen pictures of it, and you get a mental picture of the Eiffel Tower, and then it's going to be pretty difficult to distinguish between the soft, subtle, psychic signal and just your daydreams or your thought pictures. So what I would do is give you a coordinate, 14598602. All you got is that number. But in my mind, I realize that that number correlates to the Eiffel Tower. Now, when I think this, and I think the Eiffel Tower, and I think that number, that is a thought form. That is an energy form. And that energy form goes on to the great universal energy grid, which we are all connected to. And if you want to get scientific about it, this is Einstein's unified field theory. The idea that we're all one and the universe is nothing but one big seething mass of energy. I'd like to think this wooden podium, it's solid. If I hit you over the head with it, trust me, your head's going to hurt. But yet, rationally, we know that this wooden podium is nothing but a bunch of atoms mushed together. And when you stop and think about an atom, 98% of the atom is just empty space. Except it's not really empty. You've got electrons and neutrons, and they're all flashing around in there. So what I'm telling you is that we live in an energy field. And that's the entire universe. And that's when you hear people talk about psychic things. You hear about things like Rife technology, where they use frequencies to, elevate your emotions or to cure you of certain diseases. That's just why it works, because you are manipulating the energy field.
There we go. There's Jim Marrs' take on remote viewing. And Tony, you were saying that it took something like 10 years to get his book published.
Yes, it did. It certainly did take 10 years to get his book published. There was heavy censorship going on by the US government about it, because obviously they didn't want the general public to know I think, but there's nothing. I mean, they declassified thousands of documents, and I do recommend your listeners to have a look at FireDocs, which is a very good remote viewing website, and it's got all the documents on there and everything you could possibly wish for concerning remote viewing and the declassification of documents from the US government.
It is Planet X, and we're doing a remote viewing special, an RV special. And I'm so pleased to say that we've got our first guest on, Paul H. Smith. He became a psychic spy back in 1983 when he was recruited for the Army's remote viewing psychic espionage program, a program he never knew existed up until the moment he was invited to join. He was one of the longest-serving remote viewers in the military program, and during his 7 years in that program, he studied under the legendary Ingo Swann. Let's find out more, and welcome to Planet X, Paul H. Smith. Paul, welcome.
Thank you. I'm always happy to come over to the UK, even if it's just virtually.
So listen, we've not got you for long because we had a few problems getting you on the phone, and I think we've only got you up till the 9 o'clock news. So let's talk remote viewing, and fill us in on your take on it.
Well, on my take on it, you should have got a hold of me earlier. Well, I do have a couple comments. I was listening in for a while, listened to Jim Mars's little conversation there. Just to let you know, we don't call it coordinate remote viewing anymore. We actually call it controlled remote viewing.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah, which back in when they released all this material back in 96, Ingo Swann suggested that change. So that's not something we just did. He wanted to change it from coordinate to controlled to kind of reflect the idea that this is a process that you control, that the viewer learns through developing the skill, learns how to manage his or her psychic ability, if you will. I don't like that term, but I don't know what else to call it. So
okay.
Yeah.
Paul, we've got a few guys in the studio who want to put some questions to you. Tony, first, you've got a question for Paul?
Yeah, well, Paul, good evening. Honoured to speak to you. And I just wondered, why is Britain so secretive about remote viewing? We've got this kind of like little report from the MOD saying, well, we tried it, but it wasn't much good. Yet you guys in the US, you went for it big style. Why do you think there is a difference? Do you know anything about what the British did in terms of your experience?
Yeah, I did. I was actually quite interested when they released the MOD study. Actually, I thought it was a sincere effort, but I didn't think it was very well done, frankly. They actually had reinvented a number of the same errors that our program had invented earlier and figured out how to avoid. So, I don't fault them for that, but it would have been great if they'd had followed on with that. I really do think that was probably it as far as the UK was concerned, because they tend to, rightly so, not always be immediately accepting of stuff that's going on over here in the US. But you also have to recall that it was a very secret program over here too, up until literally 1996. It was a very close hold. Even if just because you had a security clearance didn't mean you got to know about it. So what's more interesting, I think, is that the UK seems to be catching on. Maybe not as far as the government is concerned, but there's a fair amount of low-key interest amongst the population in the UK in remote viewing. I've been over there and taught a class and have, over the years, done a number of interviews with both print and broadcast media. So, and you guys, I think very much to the UK's credit, I've lost track now, but I think it's 2 or 3 or maybe 4 of your universities actually have programs in scientific parapsychology research, and I think that is wonderful. We don't have a single program here in the States.
That's interesting, Paul. I didn't know that. No, I didn't know that. Yeah. You didn't have a parapsychology program in this. Could I just ask a further question? Did you fear to be getting boxed off by the KGB psychics then? Did you fear for your safety at any point with all this?
We weren't afraid of the KGB psychics. Right. It was the KGB itself. No, the issue... Well, I mean, that was an issue. That's why it was... one of the main reasons why it was so secret is because the best antidote to remote viewing is to take out the remote viewers. And so one of the reasons we had such great security at first was because they were concerned the Soviets would say, we know this is a threat. We don't know how else to deal with it. So we'll do something behind the scenes and take the viewers out if they could have found out who we were and where we were at. There's some suspicion they did take out Pat Price.
Yes, there is, isn't there? Yeah. And he was incredibly gifted.
He was. He was an amazing viewer. I mean, what's interesting is that he wasn't right all the time. I mean, he did blow sessions like the rest of us, but he was more often was correct. And when he was on, he was amazing. He did some amazing work. But there's some fairly good reason to think that maybe he was a target of KGB assassination.
Paul, I've got to ask you, we're talking about you need a target. Once you've got a target, you can remote view that target. What are some of the most sort of interesting targets that you've had to deal with over the years?
Well, I've had a ton of interesting targets.
Where has it taken you? Is it taken you off-world? Is it taken you into different dimensions?
I don't know about different dimensions, and of course, you probably would never know if it was different dimensions, right? But that's a whole philosophical thing I don't want to get into. But off-world, yes, but with different levels of credibility. I, of course, worked here on the planet. We've done targets against just about every place on the entire globe, at least every continent, and of course a lot in Eurasia, particularly Russia, China, the Middle East. But we've worked other targets as well, both for practice and for real-world operational reasons. We didn't normally go to Western Europe for operational reasons, but we had a lot of European targets for practice and for training, right? And same with other places as well. So, interesting. Let me tell you about the off-world one, because that's probably piqued your interest. Oftentimes, folks of the unit would, just to kind of test out and see what you get, they task the viewers on, I don't know, like the planet, the moon Titan, to, let's say, is it Saturn? I forget which one it goes to, maybe it's Jupiter. I was targeted on that once. I've been targeted on Mars. Other folks have been targeted on Mars. I've been targeted on the moon. And those kind of taskings can be done very credibly, where it is appropriately blind, no information passed on to the viewer, done in a kind of a scientific way. Unfortunately, there were other times when it wasn't done that way. We were targeted on things like the Galactic Federation, which who knows if such a thing even exists. UFO events that may or may not have occurred, and then other UFO events that may indeed have occurred, and we provided some interesting information on. But none of that, what I call esoteric targeting, was done as a directive from the military. So that was kind of recreational remote viewing, if you will, just to see what you could do with it.
Paul, I've got to say, we've got the news coming up, and I know you're pushed for time, but this is fascinating stuff. Can you stick around for about another 5 or 10 minutes after the news?
I can hang on for a while. Actually, I have until, about a quarter to 4 my time. I can stay on for half an hour if you want.
Stay right there. We'll pick up the tab as well. All right?
Yeah, you called me, so you're going to do it anyway.
Well, yeah, we're paying for it, so you stay right there. Talk some more after the news. Cheers, Paul. Fascinating guy. So we'll talk to Paul about some of his remote viewing experiences after the news, and we're even going to attempt to do some remote viewing ourselves. Stay right there.
This is Planet X on City Talk 105.9.
And welcome back to Planet X, the UK's biggest paranormal show. Another trip to Planet Weird with myself, Neal Atkinson, and also our Planet experts, Dan the Man, Steve Mera, and Tony Topping is in tonight as well. We are doing a remote viewing and psychic spy special on the show tonight. And let's go back to the States, and let's go back to one of our special guests, Paul Smith. Paul, are you still there?
I am, and I appreciate you playing AC/DC there. That's the ringtone that's on my phone.
Hey, that's our theme tune. That's our theme tune.
All right, it's meant to be, isn't it?
It is. Synchronicity at its best. So listen, just in case you missed the first bit of the show, we're talking remote viewing. Paul Smith, you became a psychic spy back in '83. Just do us a quick recap, just for any new listeners who might have tuned in. Just a little brief background on yourself.
Oh, I was recruited into the remote viewing program in the summer of 1983, joined up on 1 September, and spent 7 years in the program, and only getting transferred out when I had to deploy to Desert Storm. There's nothing like a war to mess up a nice, comfy place, is there? So, anyway, while I was in the program, I was an operational remote viewer. I was one of the main trainers, teaching new folks coming on board. Unit historian, did a whole bunch of different things, and had the privilege of being trained by Ingo Swan and Hal Puthoff, the folks who actually developed the methodology. And of course, Ingo was the one who invented remote viewing, if you will, or discovered it. You know, it's hard to say whether it's discovered or invented, but it was Ingo that is really the father of remote viewing. And so that was a great, wonderful experience to be able to be trained by him, even though it could be a little harrowing at times.
I'm going to say, Paul, we were talking just before the 9 o'clock news there, and you were getting into some really interesting stuff. I was asking you about targets off-world, and you mentioned that you'd remote viewed the moon and some other planets. Have you seen anything weird up on the moon, or is it just all the usual rock that we're told about from NASA?
I have to say that my sessions did turn up something weird on the moon. I want to throw in a caution, though. I'm always very hesitant to take stuff seriously that I perceive in a remote viewing session that I can't get confirmation about. Because remote viewing, even though it really does work, and it works amazingly well on many occasions, there are other issues. It doesn't always work, and your imagination can play a role in it. And so it's always good to have some checks and balances to tell how well you actually perceive the target on that particular occasion. And when you're doing things like the moon or Mars or whatever, it's interesting stuff. If you produce stuff that doesn't seem to make sense, well, it may be true or it may not. You always have to be very careful. But based on that, I did perceive some intriguing stuff, such that I became, I want to say less of a disbeliever in UFOs, maybe more of a believer in, of course, UFOs, they're real. UFOs are real. Whether or not they're guided by an intelligent beings or whatever, that's what's up for debate. And I've become more persuaded that they are. Okay. That said, I'm very cautious about any UFO-based claims because we don't have ground truth, and we know there's a lot of nonsense that's said about them too. So I don't know if that helps you any, but that's kind of my position on it.
Absolutely, yeah. No, we were talking about that. There is some good stuff out there on the internet, and there's some real rubbish out there as well. One of the Planet experts has got another question for you, Steve.
Yes, hi, Paul. I just wanted to ask a question in regarding the psychological ramifications or the side effects to being involved in the RV program. I just wondered if you'd had any or if there was any.
Well, mostly sociological effects, people thinking I'm weird.
Yeah.
From that.
Actually, I haven't even had too much of that. It all depends on how you present it. Frankly, I have not seen any normal, healthy, mentally balanced person. I've not seen any ill effects from remote viewing on those folks.
Okay.
I have seen some negative effects on people who come into the field who already maybe had some kind of psychosis or something, you know. And in that case, remote viewing might be a trigger. Of course, many things in a failed love interest, whatever, could be a trigger as well. But I've seen people get really kind of crazy about remote viewing or and say things about it and do things. And it isn't that remote viewing did that exactly. It's that they already had propensity, and that was just kind of a catalyst, I guess.
Right.
Paul, I've got to ask, can anyone do this, or is it, if you're slightly more gifted, if you're a little bit more psychic than the norm, would that make you a better, more gifted remote viewer? Or doesn't it work like that?
I think the great thing about remote viewing is that it seems that everybody has at least some ability, or at least can develop some ability. I compare it to playing the violin or playing the piano, right? There are some people who have a talent, and after the right kind of training, they become grandmasters at whatever the instrument is. The average person isn't going to get there, but if they get the right kind of training and practice diligently and really try and persevere, they actually can get pretty good even in the absence of talent, right? And remote viewing, I think, is a lot like that. I see that in my students. You know, I have I teach this for a living, and I find my students coming in, and I have only one case, I think, where I felt that student failed to get any kind of a result that indicated that they had been psychic in the particular way a remote viewer is. And I've had some who didn't do all that well. I've had some that did pretty good. I had some that did just amazing stuff. I've had a couple of students that did as good as anything that was done at Fort Meade. It's kind of a bell curve, I think. It's a lot like any other complex human skill where you have these outliers that either are really amazingly good or completely bricks, you know, can't do it at all. But everybody else is kind of in that big bulge in the middle. And it makes sense. Why should that be any different than any other human skill that people develop?
Absolutely. You know? It's Planet X, and it's a remote viewing, an RV special, with Paul Smith live from the States on the line at the moment. Dan's got a quick question as well.
Hi, Paul. Just a quick one. We're looking at remote viewing, and one of the big things about it is feedback, so we can prove that the remote viewing session has been successful. Now, obviously, that's much easier to do with targets here on Earth than it is off-world, but I was wondering if you could tell us of anything that was off-world or UFOs that you got some solid feedback of and that made you think, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, there's some interesting things like that. For example, we had one practice target that we used for viewers, and of course, I hope everybody understands the viewer has no idea what the target is. I think I heard one of your folks talking about Tony, maybe it was, or maybe it was your excerpt from Jim Mars, I don't remember, but talking about the viewer only gets a number. They don't have any conscious awareness of what the target is whatsoever, and they're preserved from that because that actually gets in the way rather than makes it work better, knowing anything about the target in advance. So they're completely blind. Well, we had this one target. It was actually one of the Mars landers that had landed there in the 70s. I forget which one it was, and targeted one of our viewers. Tom McNair, in fact, was his name, who's speaking at the remote viewing conference next week, as a matter of fact. But anyway, Tom did a really nice sketch of this Mars lander and described this place and said, well, it's weird because the horizon seems way closer than it should be. You know, of course, Mars is smaller diameter than the Earth, you know, so the horizon would look closer. And he's describing this thing, and apparently he had as far as we can tell, he had no clue at all that he was off planet when he did that. So we do get some feedback there because we know the excursion vehicle was there on the planet, had landed. We knew all about that kind of, and we even knew what it looked like. And so when he rendered that kind of information, it confirmed that at least he was able to go off planet and give an accurate report. Another really fairly famous one was Ingo Swann himself. There was a space probe headed out towards Jupiter, and Ingo and Harold Sherman, who is another, I don't know, I think if I got his name right. Yeah, I think it is Harold, who's another fairly accomplished psychic or remote viewer. He used kind of his own methodology. They both remote viewed Jupiter in terms of obtaining information that could be confirmed by the space probe that would be flying by in a couple months after that. And Ingo reported that Jupiter had rings. And, of course, at that time, no one believed that Jupiter had rings. Saturn was the only planet with rings. And they not detected any from Jupiter. Well, it turns out that it's turned in such a way that we can't see them, even with telescopes. And sure enough, when the space probe went through there, it went through the rings, detected these rings of ice particles, and reported back. And so there was confirmation that Ingo had got that correct. You know, so a lot of other stuff we can't confirm, but at least we do have some things that we're able to establish.
Interesting, Paul. Very interesting indeed. Because I did say earlier it was Saturn, but it was in fact Jupiter. So thanks for clarifying that. The team here, the presenter and everybody, they've got a template in front of them. They're going to have a go.
We're going to have a go.
It's going to be shocking, mate. It's going to be shocking. I mean, it's only 5 minutes, but we're going to have a go. We've even got a target queue number. You might want to have a go yourself. But they've got a very basic template in front of them with like an ideogram thing that they're going to do. It's all very basic. And of course, you wouldn't expect results in this short, but it's just to give them a feel. Any hints you can give the team as they do the exercise? Any hints?
Well, first let me ask, somebody has picked the target already, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Tony, you've got the target, haven't you?
Yes,
good.
Yes.
And we will trust you that nobody's passed any words along, so that's good.
Yes.
Now, are you all in the studio together?
Yes, we are.
Okay, so this only counts as a single blind target, but that's fine as long as Tony is very careful about saying anything at all.
I know the drill.
Yeah, okay, good. And so the first thing to keep in mind when you're remote viewing is to recognize that there's a lot of mental noise that goes on. We call it analytical overlay, but I won't bore you with all the details there. Mental noise is all the chatter that's always going in our minds at any time. And oftentimes when we think, we get this kind of story in our head that we think makes a whole lot of sense, it's very logical and everything like that. That's usually noise. What you should look for are things that surprise you, shapes, colors, sounds, textures, things that you wouldn't have thought of on your own that all of a sudden are there in your head. Make sure you record those kind of things, all right? And in general, you just try and allow your mind to kind of coalesce around what this target might be and continually bring your attention back to the target. Like, for example, if you're using a number as a targeting, you can always go back and refer to that number and say, okay, here's the number. What does that make me think of, I guess? Not the number itself, but when I look at this number, what am I thinking about? It's really hard to give you, obviously, you can't give a full remote viewing training course in just a couple of minutes here, but I hope that stuff might be useful to you, so you can go ahead and give it a try.
Okay, so we're going to try this now. Now, Steve's going to do it as well, so Steve's got his pen, I've got my pen.
Are you going to have a go, Paul? Are you going to have a go, do you think?
I think that I'm feeling confused enough about this. I think I better sit this out.
Very good, sir. Very good.
Okay, so give us what are we getting now? We're getting a target. We're getting a number.
Yes, we're going to get the number, which is 7.
Do I write this down?
Yes, quick as you can. Okay. 70057493. Draw shaping box as quick as you can, which is known as the ideogram. There we go. And as Paul has rightly said, exactly as it is there. What are your thoughts, impressions, feelings?
Okay, so I'm going to write texture.
Quick as you can.
Okay, right. Okay, I'm writing away. I can't think of what it smells like, so can I pass on that?
Yeah, yes.
Tastes...
what would it taste like? Yeah, stuff like that. But any further hints you can give the team, Paul? I know it's on the radio. Any further hints?
I'm kind of coming up with a blank myself right now on what to tell you. Sketching is important. Yeah, sketching is important. If you have a image of a shape or something, go ahead and sketch down.
Yeah, that's it. Oh my word. The results, Neal.
Mine looks like a Lego brick.
Neal, that's pretty good.
Is it good, is it?
Yes, it is.
Okay, well, I've written down textures brick, colours grey,
pretty hot.
Taste concrete, temperatures cool.
I'm just about to say that Steve was picking up on stone, on grey, on brick as well, and his descriptions as well.
Can I show you? I know it's on the radio. Can I show you the picture? Will we?
Oh, okay. Show me the picture.
Right, we'll show you the picture, and
we'll try and get to this on Facebook because it's for the radio.
Look at that, Neal. That's mind blowing.
Okay.
That's the art gallery,
the picture is actually St George's Hall. Okay, so the target was St George's Hall.
And has it got columns?
Yep. It has got columns. I've drawn something that looks like, it looks like a Lego brick, doesn't it?
It doesn't necessarily look like the Walker Art Gallery.
What amazes me, Paul, is the fact that you can have a collective of people doing different sections, and it all merges into the big picture. I don't know whether you have any comment on that, but I just find that fascinating.
Well, it can happen. We call that consensus viewing, where you have several viewers working at the same target, and oftentimes their impressions will overlap, and that's very reassuring, right? Every so often something goes wrong, and the one odd person out, the one viewer who may be getting a completely different picture, turns out to be the one that's right. And we don't know why that happens. Because we don't know the direct causality in this. We don't know what things make it work better. We don't know what things make it work worse except within a few general constraints. We know that it being blind is important and those kind of things, but I don't know if the atmospheric pressure is above a certain amount, does that affect it? We don't know. If the moon is in a certain phase, does that affect it? We don't know.
I'm going to say, Paul,
so sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But we do find.
Sorry, I was just going to say, does it help the fact that we did it at speed? We did it very quickly. We didn't allow our conscious or subconscious to think.
It can, and that's an important role. You want your subconscious to just provide information through like it's a conduit. You don't want your left brain to sit there and guess and offer suggestions and stuff. And obviously the brain works way faster than we can manage, generally speaking. So you're going to get some left brain influence and stuff in many cases. But working fast, as long as you're not working too fast, you still have to give give your brain time to work, your left brain time or right brain time to work. Working fast can help kind of distance yourself a little bit from the left brain influence, which can mess things up. So,
well, I know it's for just a little bit of fun, but I'm quite impressed with what we listed, the way we felt it would actually be. The building, by the way, was something called St. George's Hall, which is a huge building in Liverpool.
Yeah, I just
City
brought
Centre.
it up. It's an awesome target.
Yeah.
That's a great target.
I've put down for textures brick. I've put colours grey, concrete. And you've got similar stuff, haven't you, Steve? What did you get?
I mean, I put stone, a grey, average temperature, but the sounds, traffic, and I got like pigeons.
Yeah, which are outside.
and the image I drew was like a bit.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing to think about this. A skeptic might say, well, there's tons of targets that match that description, But here's the thing that it doesn't match. It doesn't match the Sahara Desert. It doesn't match the middle of the ocean. It doesn't match the Matterhorn. It doesn't match the Tube in London. It doesn't match the Eye of London. It doesn't match, well, it sort of matches Stonehenge. But there are so many things it doesn't match that even the fact that it does match several buildings that could look like St. George's Hall, it's still kind of persuasive, even at just a general level like that. And the fact that, how many did this, 2 or 3?
Just the 2 of us.
Okay, so the fact that both of you got similar data is a further interesting and compelling thing, although the fact that you're together, that kind of works the other direction because you may have heard each other talking or whatever, that's what a skeptic might say. But nonetheless, the fact that you did get something very similar to the target is promising,
Fascinating stuff. Paul, we're out of time, but before we go, are you going to be coming over to the UK anytime soon, or?
Actually, I am working on that. I may be doing a class in Scotland, an intermediate class in Scotland in September, October, and I'm thinking about doing a class down there in the London area if it can work out economically. That's a little bit challenging. Can I toss out my website?
Yeah, give us the details if people would like to know more about your work.
Super.
Okay, yeah. I suggest you check out my website, which is, of course, the 3 W's, .rviewer. That's the letter R in the word viewer, so RVIEWER.com. rviewer.com. And I have a course schedule on there. It's a little out of date now. I had a couple of courses finished, and I haven't changed that yet. But I have another one coming out in Vegas. But if this works and I do come to the UK, I wouldn't actually even mind maybe doing some workshops and stuff in addition to my regular training classes. And so if you get on my website, you'll see if I'm going to do any of those in your neighborhood. So.
That's brilliant. Paul, we'll get all your information on our website, and Dan's going to do all that now. We'll get it on the Facebook group so people can get in touch with you.
Okay.
And fingers crossed, when you do come over, you'll come and see us in Liverpool, just over the road from St. George's Hall.
I would love to do that. What's that? I'm sorry?
Just over the road from St. George's Hall. It's a massive tower. In fact, we should give it to him as a target, shouldn't we? It's a huge 450 feet tower that we're broadcasting from, so please come over and join us.
Yeah, I would love to do that. I'd love to come to Liverpool. We'll have to see if we can work it out, but if we can, that would be great.
Fantastic. For now, though.
And anytime, you're talking about remote viewing again and want me on and I'm available, I'm always happy to do interviews.
Oh, that's great.
Brilliant. Cheers, Paul.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
You bet. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Paul Smith there, brilliant guy. And as Paul was saying there, we'll get all the information on about his website. I think, Daniel, the fingers are going, the sparks flying.
I've already got his website on the Facebook, and I'm just putting it on the forum now, so you can get hold of it if you want to go and have a look at his work.
Brilliant. Okay, now we'll talk more about the remote viewing subject. In fact, we'll tell you about something that we're planning in just a couple of weeks in Liverpool. Tony, you're going to be doing a remote viewing workshop.
Yes, we are.
So if you'd like to, and we literally did it in just a minute in the studio. The actual workshop that will go into a lot more detail.
It will go into a lot more detail, and it will make people go away with a good grasp of the subject. It's like a crash course, and it promises to be superb. It always goes down a storm, and the results are always fascinating when people get together and have a go at it. Definitely so.
All right, get the details on that and more on the remote viewing subject next on Planet X.
Get in touch with Planet X. Call, text, email, find us on Facebook, or click on citytalk.fm/Planet X.
Well, Welcome back to Planet X and our remote viewing, our RV and Psychic Spy special, which is not easy to say when you've not got your teeth in. We've got Dan the Man in, we've got Steve Merritt from Phenomena Magazine, and also Tony Topping is in as well. We've got quite a few questions to get through, and as always, the clock is against us. Dan, what have we got for Tony so far?
A question here from Zara. It was something that you touched on earlier. She's asking whether or not you can remote view the future, and I know you said that you could, but one thing that kind of sprung in my memory was something I read about in Jim Mars's book Alien Agenda, which was one of the first to look at remote viewing. It said that some of the remote viewers had trouble seeing past 2012, or they got some kind of grey matter or something. Could you explain anything about that?
If you look at Joseph McMonagle's book Remote Viewing Time Machine, he tracks what's known as a signal line right up till about 24th century, something like that. But what always happens with this is that each emotion or each thought is a signal. Therefore, the future isn't therefore fixed. It can exist and coexist with the present. Is the discovery on that one. So therefore, they should be able to receive signals after 2012 if they're worth the salt. There are signals coming back. So there's like a track back coming out, a ping. It's like pinging an IP address. The human mind can be pinged like an IP address. You get an echo return from it. So there should be, as I've said in previous interviews, they should be seeing beyond 2012 quite easily.
Another question that we had was from John. He was asking, did you ever feel the effect of neuro-linguistic programming while you worked at the BBC?
NLP.
Well, I'll be doing more work for the BBC, and I sometimes hunt with wolves and run with foxes, but I'm surprising, so just watch this space. And that's a very interesting question. I've noted it, and I'll comment in due course once the programme I've dealt with has been broadcast. Yeah.
Okay, and another quick question from David. He's asking if you know anything about covert microwave weapons being used on individuals in the UK.
Yes, I do, but that's not really in the context. In fact, Steve would probably be more qualified on that. We ain't got time, have we? We need a whole separate show for that. But yes, definitely, it does go on, and we need a whole separate show for that. We really would.
Okay. Any more questions, Dan?
Just one more quickly from Simon. He's asking that he does some remote viewing, and he says he sometimes tries to remote ETs, and he says when he's facing an ET in a sensitive location, he gets kind of sucked out of the situations and zooms back to his body, so to speak. Does that sound familiar, or is that something?
That's quite possible. The thing is with it is that you have to be careful what you're exposing the mind to, because it can, as Paul Smith said, it can have a psychotic effect. And so you've got to be very careful with what you're looking at and treat every piece of information with a great deal of caution.
Okay, that's great. Good questions from the Facebooks there.
Yeah, if you do want to get through on Facebook, Dan is standing by. It's a closed group, but he will accept you if you're nice. To Planet X and then City Talk 105.9. Just look us up on Facebook, and as I say, Dan will accept you. Or you can, if you're quick, get a quick question in on the text talk, then a question to 61025. Right, let's go back to the States and let's get another one of our guests on. Tony, tell us more about who we're going to speak to next.
This is Gerald O'Donnell, and compared to the other remote viewers we've seen, I'm a bit of a fan of Gerald because he's a bit of an aggressive change agent. He kind of like takes remote viewing to another dimension in terms of what the planet faces and the changes that we face. He has an excellent remote influencing course that he does, and he was involved in the early 80s in kind of like helping the intelligence services with spies regarding intuition and all that kind of thing and how to enhance it. He's a brilliant chap, and I'm sure he'll be able to explain more. It's great to have him on the show.
Gerald O'Donnell, welcome to Planet X.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Great to have you on the show. Now, as Tony was talking there, and we're against the clock a little bit on the show, so we want to get straight into it. Tell us a bit about where you're at the moment, what you're working with in your sort of field at the moment.
Okay, I'll tell you what, right now, you can get communication and data from different levels. You can get communication and data from what I call the 3D level, the matrix level, and you can get communication and data from higher levels. All the levels are operating in superimpose in order to create what we call this reality. And each level has a certain perception as to what needs to be done and how a situation should evolve and how the future, which is really a probable future, should be constructed. We have, interestingly enough, in this creation, the lower level, which is us, has a tremendous input in affecting the future. But there are more levels that are in the background that hold very important keys and energy fields that allow for reality to be projected to the world in a certain way. So what we do more than anything else is that we connect, you could call this interdimensionally, to these higher levels and get information from there.
I think Tony's got a question.
Just for your listeners, Gerald, I think that I'm a big fan of your material, and it's pretty advanced. And I wondered if you could just water down for the great listening public here in the UK what essentially your message is with regarding the world and the changes around us and all that kind of thing, so that people may go away with something tangible and feel the need to look deeper into the message that you're giving out.
Okay, I'll tell you, the level that I'm getting messages lately is the level of what I call the One, which is the creator not only of this creation, but the creator of all creations, all the levels of creation. And that level, which some people call Source, and there is no name to it anyway, is very, very interested in this particular creation, because this is a key creation where most of the balance between light and dark and many different levels of creation is being played out. And because of that, this particular era, as most people realize, is undergoing very unusual times that require from us special awarenesses, both of mind and of course, spirit, and of actions, and also requires from us to understand a bit more than, the regular cause and effect situations that mankind is used to. And so what we are getting as our level of information is that the One is about to enter this creation in the awareness of mankind. How this is going to be done is not exactly explained, but I would guess that we're talking here about the inner sun as opposed to the outer sun, the sun that we see outside. And that is going to be an enlightenment, a literal enlightenment of many individuals who are going to be enlightened by the inner sun. And this is going to happen pretty soon. We're talking about the next 3 years.
Is this, Gerald, is this something that a lot of the indigenous tribes around the world have been talking about, like the Hopi?
Yes.
Is this the same sort of thing that you're talking about?
Absolutely.
And we've had...
Not only the indigenous tribes, I mean, you find this in everywhere, from the Mayans to the Old Bible. I mean, everybody knew that what they call the end times really means the end of a certain phase of creation. And we are right now at the end of a phase of creation. The mind, if you consider the whole creation as the mind of God, if you want, has expanded outward into separation as far as it can go. The notion of us being separated from each other, which is an illusion, because nothing is really separated, as quantum physics knows. It's all it's a field that's connected, interconnected constantly. The notion of separation is expanded far out within the mind as far as it could possibly go, and then the Source is therefore asking now for us to turn back, look back at the unity that we represent and are operating within, and act upon it as one. In other words, the Source is asking for us to start operating as oneness. And if we do so, then we would be able to remain operative within the new phase of creation, which is a contractive phase. That's the change of poles that we're talking about.
Gerald, it's quite obvious to me that, and from your material, from my own experiences, that there's some very dark and negative forces out there. How extreme do you think they would become in limiting the human race from that realization that you're talking of?
Those forces were created as programs originally, but were energized by creators and by the thoughts of not only this mankind, because they are parallel universes. And, many times when we talk about ETs and so forth, they're not coming from our cosmic world. They're coming from different universes at different frequencies. So they enter our reality and they get out of our reality at will. But all those forces are forces that originally were pre-programmed to help the illusion of separation as an experiment, so that the one mind, if you want, the one creator, could see itself reflected in so many reflections, i.e. characters, and perceive that he is many. That's an illusion. And that ability to perceive itself as being an illusion was helped by those programs. What happened is that many of those pseudo creators or creators. Many of them have fallen into this type of operation, have become enamored with it, and have taken power out of it, and they want to remain in the system. So they're basically opposing this reintegration of creation back into the one, and they're very powerful.
Gerald, we're going to have to wrap it up there. Wow. Fascinating stuff. Yeah. Can we get you on as another guest in the not-too-distant future?
Yeah, I would love to come back, because this covers really everything that you guys are doing, from extraterrestrial to the future, and there is much to be talked about the next 3 years. It's going to be really important for people to be aware of certain things.
Brilliant. Gerald O'Donnell, we will get you back on in the not-too-distant future. It is weird, though, isn't it? Because we started talking about remote viewing, and all roads lead back to ET.
Yeah,
it's crazy, isn't it?
Incredible.
Listen, thank you so much to all our guests. Thanks to Dan and also Steve. Brilliant for coming in, and thank you, Tony, as well.
No problems at all.
And if you'd like to know more about the workshop that we're going to be doing on the remote viewing, I'll give you some details at the end of the show, but it's all on Facebook. Join the Facebook group or go to planetxlive.co.uk for more details.